So at this point, I have masked out those areas which I want to protect, making it easier for me to paint leaves and petals. And now we are ready to paint. But before we start painting, you need to be able to protect your paper. So I have made a window type of protection using tracing paper. And this way, if we have an accident by dropping our brush or something like that, or something splatters, chances of it damaging our work are far less. It's also nice that you can cover a section up, or at the end of the day, cover your artwork so it doesn't get dusty or so the cat doesn't walk on it. So our first wash is going to be a tea wash, and this will help us to separate the yellow areas from the green areas. And it's usually a very, very light tint of whatever color is our local color. First thing we're going to do is dampen those areas that we want to paint with just the slightest bit of water. You don't want it to be too wet, just a slight amount of water. Now, these first washes can be flat washes using the puddle technique that you learned in Watercolor 1. So we're going to go very light. I'm going to start with this bud at the top. I'm going to try to avoid the drawing pencil line by painting up to it, but not on top of it. And we'll do this section by section until we have a nice flat wash on every aspect of this painting. Now obviously those areas that I have mascoid on we can't paint. So we're going to leave those for future application. Remember, with a flat wash, you don't want to go back into it. If you've left something unpainted, wait until it dries and then just go in with your dry brush and paint that area which was neglected. I'm going to use a second brush here just to dampen the page. And as you can see, we're going to paint right over the masked area. Remember to use your puddle technique to move your paint around. And don't leave a puddle at the bottom edge of anything so that it doesn't start to cauliflower on you. A little bit of a puddle down here, so we need to pick that up. Okay, so I'm going to proceed like this until I have all of the washes in. The only places where I won't have a wash is on this petal here because there's mascoid, and on this bud here because there's mascoid, and I need to paint that leaf first. So this will be left until after this leaf is painted, and then I can go back in and I can put flat washes into those areas. So I've started painting the green sections, and I find that it's a little bit on the wet side. Everything looks a little too wet, which means what'll happen is the paint will start to migrate to the edges and create a cauliflower edge, which we don't want. So if it's really wet, and it's the same kind of wetness when you wet the paper, if it's shiny, you know that it's too wet, whether it's paint or whatever. So you want to dry off the brush. Don't clean it, just dry it off, and then go back in and pick up the wetness. Dry it off, go back in and pick up the wetness. At this point, the entire flower is just about blocked in, except for those few areas where I have mascoid that I have to wait. So this last section here is the stem, and even though this is going to be a tea wash on this stem, I'm going to feather it out and let it just fade rather than having a sharp edge ending. So I'm going to do that at this point, picking up, first of all, some of the moisture in this upper section where I want it to be the true tea wash color, and then rinse my brush and just fade it out to nothing, like so. And that is going to be my way of working with this particular stem. So now we're ready to start thinking about our shadow colors. I've taken my photograph and converted it to black and white so we can see where these shadows really fall. I'm still going to be able to dampen the page, especially with the yellows, because they're not going to move anywhere, so that I have a little bit more control over what's going on. And now we have to start working with graded tones. Keep your shadows quite light. You don't want them to be overwhelming. And in this case, I'm just using local color mixed with a little bit of neutral tint, and looking at my photograph and seeing where I have shadows coming into the painting. And try to avoid having any edges by cleaning your brush and softening any edges that you might have at this point. Look and see what shape your shadow takes so that you know what areas have to be softened. It looks to me like there should be more shadow along this edge here, so I'm going to add just a little bit more in this area and let it come down, even though I know it's not visible, but when we lift out these stamen, there will be little dark areas that relate to the shadows on this particular petal. Now, I'm keeping them fairly light because you can always go back in and add more. It's not so easy with these yellows and greens to take it away and lift it out again. But you can always make them darker as you progress with this painting. It's because this color is a modified yellow, you can use it to do quite a bit of sculpting without it getting too heavy looking. But it may need some green in here too, so we're going to start with a little yellow here at the top, for instance. And then I'm going to go to the green and charge the green into the yellow, because this particular area needs to have some green in it. So you really have to look at what your specimen is doing in order to get the right color.